Hey everybody, Andre here, and today we're going to talk about sonata form. So, what is sonata form? Well, form is a way that composers organize their music, organize the structure of the piece. And sonata form is a very specific kind of organization. So, it was a very popular kind of form. It was ubiquitous for a long time. I mean, from the 1700s through the 1800s, well into the 20th century. And it's a very specific and sort of complicated kind of form. So essentially, what sonata form is a ternary form. So ternary means three parts. So that's what it is at its core. You have basically an A section, a B section, and an A again. That's what ternary form is. But sonata form goes deeper than that. The first A in sonata form is called the exposition. The B section is called the development. And the A, when it returns, is called the recapitulation. Now, in sonata form, it's very important that this A, when it comes back, it is modified somehow. That's what this one here, this prime. So A, B, A prime tells you that this A has been changed due to whatever musical development happened here in the B section. So, okay, so how is this different than ternary form, really? Because this is kind of ternary form. In each section, there are specific things that happen. So, in the exposition, the most important thing, the defining characteristic of sonata form is the conflict between one group and another group. And going further there, sometimes we call it theme 1 versus theme 2, or primary theme versus secondary theme, or theme group 1 and theme group 2. There's a lot of different ways to talk about it. Theme 1 and theme 2, that's kind of easy. Theme 1 versus theme 2. The primary conflict is all about harmony. So theme 1 is in the tonic. Either major 1 or minor 1, depending on, are you in a major key or are you in a minor key? Theme 2 in a major key sonata will be in the dominant. And theme 2 in a minor key sonata will be in the relative major. It's very important that you know this relationship because this is the defining characteristic of what sonata form is. Some people say, well, you have a melody here and then you have a very different melody here. Not always the case. Think of monothematic sonata forms, like the Haydn 104. There's only one melody, and that one melody is presented here in the tonic key, and then it's presented here in the dominant key. So you have the most important thing to understand in sonata form is that the conflict is not melody based, it's harmony based. Harmony based. Okay, so that's not it though. That's not the only stuff. It's not the only stuff that's in the exposition. How do you get from theme 1 to theme 2? Now, usually there is some kind of a transition which modulates, typically. And it takes you from the tonic key to that secondary theme area. And after theme 2, you'll usually have what's called a closing theme or closing material. And what this is, it continues to be in either the dominant or the relative major, but perhaps the texture is a little different, or maybe there's a new motive or something else that sets it apart. Maybe there was a cadence at the end of theme 2, and there's like a really strong new section, but it's still in the same key area. That's what closing theme is. So at its core, the exposition consists of these four things. If either of these things if any of these things are omitted, one of two things have happened. Either it's not a sonata form, or something really weird is going on. Both of those things are possible, right? So the one of the reasons why we learn these kind of formal archetypes is for you to be able to look at a piece of music and say, is this kind of a standard approach, or is there something quirky, interesting going on here? That's the advantage of knowing the form. Now, there are some other things that might happen. In between theme 1 and the transition, you might have an episode. How I think about episodes is an episode is based on the music that came before it, like it's in the same key, but maybe there was a strong cadence at the end of this section, and there's a new little phrase that also ends with a cadence. But the main difference between an episode and a transition is the episode doesn't modulate. So no modulation. But it's like clearly defined by some kind of cadence. And sometimes you'll see episodes between theme 2 and closing theme, but it's a little bit less it's less defined because you really don't expect some kind of a modulation here, but you do expect a modulation here. So I think it's a little clearer when there's an episode here. Sometimes you'll have what I call a codetta. So it's like a little mini ending. And the codetta either wraps up the exposition nicely or it gives you a mini transition back to the beginning. Because in classical pieces, certainly, you'll have a repeat sign at the end of the exposition. And you'll go back to the beginning and do it all again. That's a hallmark of the style, especially in the 18th century. Okay, so that's the exposition. Now, what about the development? Well, the development is where the composers often went nuts and just did what they wanted to do, and it's all in the name. They develop the music from the exposition. They highlight the conflict between theme 1 and theme 2. So things that might happen in the development, you might have fragmentation of the motives. You will definitely have sequencing. So sequences of melodies, sequences of harmonies. You might have pedaling, especially up high. You might have a high note being just repeated over and over while more music happens underneath. And you'll have modulations to distant or unexpected keys. One of the most common places to go in a development, especially in the classical sonata forms, would be to the subdominant, to the 4. But there's examples of developments exploring really distant key areas, and it just depends on the music, right? But these are the things that you would expect. And there kind of could be a lack of strong cadences. So you might have phrases that are defined. You might have an 8-bar phrase, another 8-bar phrase, but it won't be so definitive where each phrase ends like in the exposition. It'll be more flowing, typically. But all in all, at the end of a development, you have to go back somehow. So there's usually a section at the end of the development called the re-transition. And what this re-transition does is it transitions you back to the music of the exposition, namely what is called the recapitulation. So it's the transition to the recapitulation. That's how I remember it anyway, the re-transition. And the point is, here it ends with the 5. Half cadence in the original key. So that's what the development typically is, okay? Now, the recapitulation is basically like the exposition. You will have theme 1 in the tonic, and you'll have theme 2, but this time theme 2 is also in the tonic. And the idea is, in the recapitulation, the conflict between theme 1 and theme 2 is resolved. So it stays in that same key. That's the whole point. So a couple of interesting things might happen here. If there was an episode, maybe that episode is gone. Maybe it's been eliminated. Maybe not. But one thing that is going to change is that the transition here, which originally was modulating you from theme 1 to theme 2, from the tonic to the dominant, or the tonic to the mediant, to the relative major, it doesn't have to modulate anymore. So oftentimes there's going to be new material here. Or there's going to be a truncation where you just eliminate a bunch of bars. Or you'll have an extension. That's possible too. So big changes will happen here in the transition because you don't have to modulate anymore. And then you'll probably have the closing theme again afterwards, also in the tonic. That really is sonata form in a nutshell. Now, a few things to keep in mind. Sometimes, at the beginning, you'll have something called an introduction. And that does exactly what you think it's going to do. It introduces the piece. How you know something is introduction is if you remove this music and it does not affect the form of the piece, then it's an introduction. But if you take this out and then suddenly the theme 1 transition theme 2 diagram doesn't work anymore, then this is not an introduction. This is part of the exposition. One example that I can think of is the Mozart Piano Concerto in D minor, the number 20, where the strings start with a brum bum 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 brum bum 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 bum. It almost sounds vaguely like an introduction, but if you remove that from the form, then it wouldn't work. The sonata form would break down. So that's how you know if something's an introduction or not. At the end, after the last cadence of the recapitulation, typically there's like a perfect authentic cadence at the end here. There might be something called a coda. And the same exact thing applies. If you remove this from the form and it's not affected, then it's a coda. If you remove this from the form and suddenly you don't have a closing theme anymore, it's probably not a coda. But this is basically what sonata form is. Okay. Why? Why do we care? Well, there's a number of reasons. I mean, of course, just understanding how a piece develops over time. You get that. You get the flow. It's like reading a book, right? It's like there's a story being told across the piece, and if you know how those pieces of the puzzle are linked together, you have a better understanding of what the story is telling you, or what's going on in the story. But also, knowing what is standard or common will help you when you get to pieces that don't do what's expected. There's a lot of times that composers would take this form and play with it because, that's art. You want to express. And they would take an existing archetype like this and mess with it. Like an example would be, I already said the Haydn 104, where there's only one theme. It's a monothematic. There's still the tonic versus dominant, but there's only one melody. That's weird. In the Mozart G minor symphony, the 25, I think, where in the development, normally you'd have the development of the conflict between theme 1 and theme 2, but in that piece, theme 2 isn't even referenced at all. It's just theme 1. It's strange. There's a later sonata form piece, the Sibelius piano sonata in F major. When you get to the recapitulation, instead of the second theme being in the regular tonic, it's in the minor tonic. That's weird. So those are just a few examples of among so many sonata form examples where knowing the standard will help you appreciate when a composer will take some creative liberty. So I hope this Sonata Form 101 was useful for you. I know we kind of sped through, but if you know this, it'll be a lot easier for you to tackle other pieces. And I hope to have some sonata form analyses for you on this channel in the future. So keep your eyes out for that. If you like this stuff and you want to see more, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, hit the bell, make sure you get a notification every time I upload. But thank you so much for watching. I hope this was useful for you. Yeah, have a great day.